be aware of. Today's webinar is being recorded and you are currently in a listen be only mode. This means you are muted and unable to turn on your camera. The webinar recording and slide deck will be available within 48 hours on our website in the webinar archive section. And we'd like for today's webinar to be as interactive as possible. Therefore, we encourage you to converse through the webinar using the chat feature. If you have any questions based on what Dr. Nissen shares, please use the Q&A option to submit your questions. Some questions will be answered throughout the webinar. However, the majority will be answered at the end of the presentation. If you have any questions regarding the webinar functions, you can send me a private chat and I will assist you. We also want to remind attendees about the opportunity to receive a Futurist in Training digital badge when you attend all 3 webinars. So for $60, that's 60, digital badges will be awarded to those interested upon attendance verification and payment received. If you're interested or want to know more, you can email us at info@socialworkmanager.org. Last, let's take a moment to see who we have the pleasure to share the space with today. So using the chat, please tell us who you are, what you do, and where you are zooming in from. Okay. Hi, Patricia. I see some people here. Hey, Tracy. Good to see you today. Gigi, welcome from LA. Atlanta, Georgia. We've got people from Kentucky, Patricia. Hey, Linda from the New Social Worker, welcome. It's good to have you here again. Rain, great to see you. MSW student from Portland State University, Melissa, welcome. Oh, great, so many people. Hi, Dennis. All right, so great. I'm so happy that everyone's here today. So now I would like to introduce you to our presenter. Former Dean and Professor Dr. Laura Nissen has been a member of the Portland State University School of Social Work community since 2000. She is currently the first inaugural Presidential Futurist Fellow at Portland State. Dr. Nissen has just been awarded a 2-year grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to launch a national social work education health futures lab to explore the power of futurist thinking to today and tomorrow's social work profession. She has brought futurist thinking into the School of Social Work in the form of a first strategic plan at the school in its 55-year history. She is a foresight practitioner and a research fellow in the Institute for the Future and has spoken on futurist thinking on social work and social change at the National Association of Deans and Directors of Schools of Social Work and in numerous social work education and community spaces. Dr. Nissen, thank you for your time and for sharing your expertise with us these past 3 weeks. We're all excited about today's keynote. So without further ado, take it away.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for coming back. This is fantastic to spend time with you at such a historic time. I'm thrilled to see so many names that were here before and new names, but as is my practice, it's been a particularly remarkable 3 weeks, hasn't it? I mean, just an incredible time to be alive and to be a social worker and to be a futurist and to be a human being in this moment. So as is my practice in this moment, I just want to take a moment to start out with a moment of silence. We've talked about the COVID-19 losses. Last week, we had a moment of silence for George, Brianna, and Ahmaud. This morning, I'd just like to hold in our hearts and with great solidarity all of the people in the world who are pushing back on police violence this morning. Thank you for joining me in sending our strength and affirmation, and many of us will probably be out in the street right after this. So thank you. I want to just start this morning by talking a little bit about Afrofuturism, and I'm going to end the session with this as well. This particular billboard, "There Are Black People in the Future," is by an artist, Alicia Wormsley. It's on display in Detroit, Michigan during this past year for an exhibition called Manifest Destiny. And it is related to Afrofuturism's goal of helping to lift and boost the signal of an Afrofuturist sensibility about the world. If you're interested in more of this, I'm going to give you just a quick launch pad to this topic, but a very interesting article is to read "Why Are There No Black People in the Jetsons?" From someone in 2013. It's a really great piece. You can Google it if you're interested. Afrofuturism is the reimagining of a future filled with arts, science, and tech seen through a Black lens. The term was conceived 25 years ago by author Mark Derry in his essay called "Black to the Future." It's an epistemology. It encapsulates liberatory sort of concerns and approaches on the history of Black thought, knowledge, and artistic production from its imagined futures. It inspires deep and imaginative possibilities for other ways of thinking and operating, challenges whiteness, colonialism, heteropatriarchy, and other isms by intentionally operating beyond them. It creatively expands assumptions, boundaries, and history. Afrofuturism creates new kinds of potential and new kinds of power. And Afrofuturists would say, and I agree, these are the very kinds of spaces that are essential in generating post-normal solutions to our contemporary challenges. They are guided by Black voices and imaginations. So for this session, I put together a kind of launch pad for social workers to get acquainted with Afrofuturism. There's films, there's articles, there's popular press information. And I urge you in this moment, as you are leaning into the possibility of becoming a futurist yourself, in this moment in history, there's never been a more important time to, I think, get acquainted with the voices and the passion and the power and the incredible importance of Afrofuturism as a way to lift our imaginations towards what might come next. So in our third webinar, you're still here, our last two sessions, what is futures thinking and why is it important? And the second webinar focused on how futures practice work. This webinar pulls all that together, and I'm going to offer some ideas and notes from my journey about recommendations on how we prepare social work to be future ready. How do we use these tools to evolve our profession on purpose? And as important as ever, how do we build a sense of possibility and hope in these times? Quick, for anyone who might not have been here, just a quick review of what we've done so far. Futures thinking is that deepening and strengthening our ability to anticipate and imagine futures in new ways, commit to reducing short-termism in our immediate and extended circles of influence. Futures thinking ultimately is about helping us make better decisions, both exploring unintended consequences as well as underdeveloped possibilities, and resisting powerful actors who dictate what the future is going to be in favor of increasing agency and democracy in co-constructing desired futures while protecting and resisting from undesired futures. Futures thinking is not neutral, it is powerful, and powerful people have been, and entities have been using futures thinking for a long time. Who gets to wield that power? The purpose of a futures thinking push in social work, I believe, is to help bring futures thinking and the power of it to all our spheres of influence and practice. It connects the past, the present, and the future, learns from the past, makes sense of the present as we deal with it, and connect both of these to an arc of meaning in the choices we have. To unlearn our way of thinking about what is and isn't possible. And every minute of every day, the veil between those things gets especially porous right now. I will be sharing some ideas about that. It's critical, postmodern, anti-oppressive, anti-colonial, cultural, interpretive, participatory, holistic, with the deep bow to an indigenous lens where I believe futures thinking originated. I heard last week on another gathering I was on, futures thinking is an alternative to magical thinking. And we are often engaged, we see a lot of magical thinking going on in our world. Futures thinking is about learning, playing, growing, and acting in new ways. So futures practice is something individuals do in networks with other futurists, in groups or collectives and teams, in organizations like the Red Cross, the AARP, World Bank, Facebook, Federal Foresight Network in the US, and something countries do, or groups of countries, Scotland, Finland. There's a European Futures Network. We have a United Nations, a whole office dedicated to the future in United Nations. Futures work is about applying theory, ethics, practices, and discipline study of social science-informed elements of futures knowledge and action to increase foresightfulness and make better, more thoughtful decisions together. Deepens readiness, anticipation, agency, agility, intelligence, and imagination to the problems of today to increase the possibilities for a better future. At this moment, this quote just spoke to me this week as I was completely revising this presentation because of the time we're in. We are in an imagination battle. Adrienne Maree Brown, who's a wonderful futurist and someone I highly recommend reading, yesterday's problems, yesterday's solutions, what really comes next? What will we do in this moment that we're in? What are our opportunities to take things to a completely different level? What can we imagine? And that is the ultimate challenge, I think, for all of us. And then to boost the political will to take those imaginative ideas to the next level. Our work this morning is really about centering in what would it look like if social work was ready for the future in a new way? What would we be thinking? What would we be doing? What would we be learning? What will our profession look like in 10 years if we started truly investing in these questions now? And more painfully and appropriately, what would it look like if we don't? And I don't just mean waxing poetic, although there's room for that, about let's just think about the future. This is about the disciplined work we've been talking about the last 2 weeks. What are these possibility spaces? So futurists value history. And so I want to start this morning by just looking back on the social work profession. This is an incomplete and passionate and biased, to me, because I wrote it, not scholarly look back at the social work profession. But this is my take. This is how I interpret the history of our profession. We are a progressive era profession born, really conceptualized at a time of deep structural inequity in our country. We have an incrementalist tradition, which means we change generally bit by bit rather than big leaps. We are divided in our profession, and we always have been, between individual and collective well-being. There are threads between them, but there's a division. We have white savior and or race-centered social control routes, really to reconcile. There's been a push for credibility and professionalism in the midst of our quote unquote good works and improvement of the human condition, which I genuinely believe social work has believed it is dedicated to. And I am a dedicated social worker, so I own the pluses and the challenges here. There's been intense cultivation of our discipline. Social work has worked hard to build a foundation as an emerging site of knowledge production, as well as community impact. There are incredible divides along the political spectrum. There are conservative social workers. There are very progressive, radical social workers, and everything in between. We all aspire to a common code of ethics and a common meaning of our profession. We are all one family, but we are sometimes deeply annoyed with each other. And I would say that's never been more true than right now. There's been an embrace of licensing, evidence-based practice, and manualized treatments to boost the quality and consistency of our impact. There's also been increasing neoliberalism, which has devolved and absorbed both our education and our practice ecosystems. It has been eating it. There's production of authentic and original knowledge, and that has accelerated. Social work is contributing truly breakthrough ideas and thinking. We've had setbacks, we've had lack of progress alongside breakthroughs. We have been both disheartened and inspired together. And we continue to evolve. We have reinvented ourselves. There are increasing equity concerns within our own profession. And there are increasing challenges about the effectiveness of our profession to work with the state or with markets, which are so ultimately slow and or indifferent to addressing equity and the other concerns of social change. We talk about it. It gets talked about a lot, but the numbers don't lie. Equity is not moving in the right direction at the rate we would like to see it at this moment in history. The increase in evidence-based tradition with related gains and sophistication has happened, but prioritizing this has precluded a focus on grassroots work, on the emergent, on the improvisational, and it has deprioritized respect and focus on communities themselves who never stopped trying to solve their own problems while social work was becoming more professionalized. We have a kind of retrospective rather than prospective gaze. So we tend to look around right now and look back. We are not looking ahead as a profession. There's urgent complexity of social problems and challenges and also opportunities which are multiplying. And professions themselves are in a state of transition for next era. Deployment of expertise in an area of ubiquitous information and artificial intelligence is much in discussion. Welcome to 2020. I want to go through that because it really sets the stage, I think, for what do we do next? What happens next as a profession? So holding these things in our mind, thinking about the fact that neoliberal concerns have been devolving and absorbing us for quite some time is really a primary thing. I'm going to take you through a couple of games and just throw in a few little fun things here throughout this presentation. Wonderful futurist Jane McGonigal turned me on to Nicole Lazaro, who is a gaming theorist. And gaming is a huge part of futures work because people learn better as they play, but it turns out that the more you can turn the work into play, the more depth, commitment, learning, and impact might actually come about as a result of that. So I urge you to look up Nicole Lazaro. This is her overview. I'm going to take you through 3 little thought experiments. We're going to play a little bit with our thinking. So the first little game is going to be some classic frames from the year 2030, just 5 years from now. What will a social worker be doing in his, her, or their day-to-day job in the year 2025? The classic frames, there are 4. The first is things get better. Some are saying the coronavirus means the era of big government is back. National shocks, depression, World War II, the financial crisis has a way of expanding the role of federal government in lasting ways. That people are tired of having no infrastructure in our communities. They want to see something happen. So in this scenario, we'll be busy rebuilding things to make them better. There'll be earned faith in institutions returning. Equity will improve. We'll start setting goals again and we'll not feel like we're under assault. We will feel hopeful. There'll be a turn towards green sensibilities. There'll be much more attention to inclusion and equity. So thinking about this future, which is a plausible future, what will social workers be doing in this future? And I'll just leave you to just think about that for a second. What will social workers be doing? We'll be busy building, right? We'll be busy planning. We'll be busy engaging, dismantling, and reconstructing very important parts of our social world and our natural world and our scientific world in ways that have devolved. So things get better, things improve. That's a plausible scenario. Another plausible scenario is that things get worse. New kinds of threats, this is what futurists call a collapse scenario. New kinds of threats and challenges, maybe out of old issues, cause even worse risks to vulnerable populations and maybe to society at large. There's further breakdown in community well-being. Artificial intelligence takes a larger role that is not agreed to by the larger society. Climate change has more drastic sort of impacts that we begin to feel. And technology in our communities creates even deeper levels of assault, if that is possible, deeper levels of assault than what we're seeing right now. As we know, facial recognition technology is a highly contested technological tool that's being used in cities and other places to surveil. What would social workers be doing in this future? If this happened, what would we be doing every day? What would our work look like and feel like? And you can deeply sort of feel the contrast between this future and what we'll be doing and what it'll feel like, and this future. Another future is called the conservation future, which is a future that just sort of stays the same. And in this future, the vaccine takes longer than we think it would. Should market issues complicate availability and use? This is 5 years out, so we muddle along. Flares continue and people gradually learn how to live with a long-term rolling pandemic. Deaths level off due to heroic efforts by communities. We continue to have deep equity concerns and social action related to that. So we're frozen in a sort of space like we are right now, where things are moving and things are going back and forth, back and forth. What would social workers be doing in that future? What would it feel like to be in that future? And then the last future is transformation. That something might happen that's so big, the world will truly not be on the other side of it. What will social workers be doing in this future? And every day that I get up and watch TV, I hear something else that just makes me think things are possible that we never used to think were possible. So imagining what does the transformational turn mean? What would it look like? Well, it might look like defunding the police in a pretty significant way. And just this morning, I got up and saw that Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti is cutting $100 million, $150 million from the Los Angeles Police Department. So what would social workers be doing in a kind of beyond policing climate? And so all four of these kind of give you a sense of the stretching of the muscles that goes into futures thinking. What I would say is that part of the game part here is to challenge ourselves and our structures to be thinking about, actually, how would we plan for a little bit of all four of these things? Because the plausibility is high that some aspect of all four of them might actually happen. And we have to be ready on all fronts. But thinking this way gives us a scaffolding, it gives us an architecture to really push out our imaginations, to both, again, think through the unintended consequences, but think about the connections. This leads us to our next game, imagine bigger, to literally make ourselves, invite ourselves joyfully, sit and think about 100 things we could do if half the money currently spent on policing in the United States were spent on something else. I looked it up this morning, and the latest numbers I could find were 2018. There was $115 billion spent on policing in the United States. So let's take $57 billion. What are 100 things we could do with $57 billion to promote community well-being, safety, and thriving? And I would actually love to start a challenge among the people on this call. I would love to see a challenge across every school of social work in the United States to challenge their own school to come up with 100 things. What would the students have to say? What would the faculty have to say? What are 100 things we could do with that money that are both things we might immediately think of and things that really push us, again, out to that transformational level? Imagining bigger is a lot of what futures thinking is about. And then finally, the third thought experiment or moment of play in this is to really just take a moment and imagine some jobs of the future in social work. If I were with you in person and we had more time, we'd do a whole activity about this as we would with the other two. But I urge you to take this into your spaces and play with it. So you ready to take off on a little jet of our imagination? How about a community peace coach, an alternative to policing? Or how about an algorithmic race and justice community review organizer, someone who prevents and interrupts race and justice bias in commonly used community algorithms? Or how about a digital access navigator, someone who ensures equitable access to technology and the internet? How about a decarceration deconstruction specialist, someone who's technically involved in deconstructing both the social and built prison system in the United States? Or a reparations program coordinator, distributing reparations? How about a well-aging specialist, someone who links tech and community to enhance equitable longevity among our community members? Or a few more, a community smart city governance board development, ensuring that citizens are primary beneficiaries of smart city technology. Or a neurotech rehabilitation specialist, someone who removes malfunctioning gaming brain implants and helps people live without them. A universal basic income coach to coach people through the economic transition from survival kind of work to being meaning and purpose focused. Or a home health robot personalizer who can calibrate your personal care robot to your unique health needs. How would you add your own? I urge you to play along at home. What are those social work jobs of the future? It's a lot of fun to play with this concept. And I've had a chance to do this with students a few times. They're really fun to play with in this space. What is the point of all this playing? What is the point of all this thinking? It's about preparing us to really enter the space in our own profession, to think about the weight of history, the push of the present, which is so vibrantly around us right now. The present is being pushed, and the pull of the future. All three are working together to create these possibility spaces for what happens next. And our ability as social work futurists to push towards that future that we want is very much about our agility in our thinking and our collective ability to expand our toolkit in a bunch of new ways. So how do we think about social work and the future directly, head on? We have to separate ourselves or exponentially expand, thinking about just the way it's been, just operating as if the way it's been is always going to be the way it is. It's also not just about the way it is right now, the present and our recent background. There is something else possible. It's also not just the way it's emerging. The current trends are interesting and they give us a glimpse of what might be coming, but it's also that way it's forming around the corner from where we can see. And that's the futures lens. That's the slippery part. That's the creative part, but the most powerful part. So what new social problems and challenges and solutions are just around the corner from what is in our current view? So I put a few slides together just to consider. So we'll start, of course, with racism. How it's been. So time prevents me from doing a complete history of civil rights in our country and racism, but we're getting daily lessons in this. There's enormously accessible, impactful histories all over the place right now, which are important to look at and learn from. It's also important to understand what's happening right now, what's happening in our streets right now, and how they're connected to that history, right? But it's equally as important to understand and look ahead at how it's evolving, how racism is getting embedded into our tech, how racism is being expressed through different responses to climate change. What's around the corner from where we sit right now? And what's the cost of not being aware or engaged with what's coming? the whole reason I'm sitting here with you this morning is because as I sit in these future spaces, I see things unfolding that we are not talking about in social work, and they have to do with these issues. It is an ethical imperative for us to look around the corner, for us to involve ourselves in what is happening in terms of the design of the technological and also the climate change responses that are going to disproportionately impact vulnerable populations. And not just lift racism or boost racism, but exponentially intensify it. Health as another example. How has health been looked at in history? How has it evolved? How have our approaches, how has medicine evolved? How is it now, both in terms of progress and setbacks in our streets and society? How is it evolving? And what's around the corner? Again, what's the cost of not being aware and engaged in what's coming? And as I've said in a couple of the other sessions, what is coming, having been to several different places where I've been privileged to get a peek at the future of health and the future of health promotion and human longevity, it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary what's coming in terms of, and really what's already here. What's concerning is the inequitability of who will have access to this and who will not. How will longevity really play out? What are the political determinants of health, not just the social determinants of health? And literally, will health be something that people can buy? And I've heard that phrase, buying health. What is the cost of not being aware and not being engaged in what's coming next? Community organizing and the future of democracy is another possibility space that's really important. There's a sort of how it's been, sort of a look at history, how it is both now, both in terms of progress we've made and setbacks in our streets and our society, how it's evolving and what's around the corner, and what is the cost of not being aware and engaged with what is coming. So obviously, just in the last week, we've seen an exponential reaction that has been accelerated by new ways of organizing and working, new expressions of voice, very diverse voice and leadership in all kinds of ways to movement build and boost democracy signals. At the same time, we've seen use of computational propaganda. We've seen people hijacking. We've seen both traditional and non-traditional forms of suppression. And these things will also continue to evolve in good and bad ways, in ways that are both ethically in alignment and full of moral imagination, but also full of very dangerous fascist elements. So there's costs to not being engaged and aware of what's coming. This goes on and on. What's next in mental health? What's coming? Telepsychiatry, telehealth in general is a huge sort of push. There's a lot of attention to that for obvious reasons with COVID. But there's been a lot of research going on that for a while, as well as this is a book I picked up the other day, Artificial Intelligence in Behavioral and Mental Health Care. Are we teaching this? Are we aware of what's happening? Are we aware of how artificial intelligence is playing a role in how behavioral health and mental health services? And as I touched on last time, the neurotechnological aspects of change are accelerating very quickly. This particular book is by someone I heard speak, Neurotech and National Security and Defense, but this neurotech push is happening in all kinds of spaces. And then, of course, we have what many are saying is a tsunami or a tidal wave of mental health concerns coming forth from the times that we are in right now. And how will social work prepare to participate in the healing and restoration and the opening of a door to sort of a new era of mental health in all kinds of new ways? Of course, the future of work and the future of organizations will impact social work in a big way. Many of us are working from home in new ways. Many of us are feeling the future of work in unexpected ways. And that will only continue, but so will the array of skills and structures that are around us. The future of work, the future of organizations, change timeline is being accelerated rapidly because of the times that we're in. And that will impact social work. So what we do, where we do it, the way we do it is likely to change. That's a huge site of possibilities. And then I just want to remind you all about the future of power itself, because I think social work, again, part of the history of our mix, some of us work in hierarchies and some of us work in networks. And there's tension between both parts of our social work family. The truth is we have to work together to understand that hierarchies are probably not going to go away, but networks are going to grow in power and complexity. So how do we build enough capacity into social work to do the breakthrough thinking and work that we want to do, to understand and be able to navigate as many kinds of power channels as we can? Going to be important for the future. So those are just a few of the sites of possibility. And now I want to walk into how we build a map for social work, the social work profession, all in all. I would say there are 7 key areas for social work focused dialogue and focused work. And by that, I mean spaces where change is accelerating exponentially. Accumulated, multiplied, and distributed equity issues, which is the moment we're in right now. We're living in a world where there are accumulated, multiplied, intensified, calcified, distributed equity issues. We're at breaking points in many spaces in our society and in our world. Technology is another place where things are changing so fast. Climate change, there's been less focus for obvious reasons in the last few months on climate change, but the truth is the climate change challenge has not gone away. The urgency has not gone away. Health disparities, the literal tax that people pay in terms of years of their life because of our health disparities that have been sustained and that have continued to be very resistant to change. The geopolitical issues, migration and others, the geopolitical instability that we are experiencing right now is going to continue to be an issue to look at and to think about and imagine how social work plays a role. And then I put a category on here just called the emergent, because the truth is there are always going to be other things. And I think social work also has to prepare itself for what's going to come next. If anyone on this call is a former student of mine, you know that in every class I teach, I always start by saying, okay, here's the class and here's what we know right now. But I can guarantee you that maybe by the time the class is over, a mere 10 weeks from now, everything may be different. You have to prepare for problems or solutions we can't quite even conceptualize yet. So you take what we can, but preparing ourselves for the emergent is something futures thinking can help us do so well. I want to just dive into one particularly right now, and that's technology, because I think social work has a noble, proud, and strong beginning to talking about social work and technology. We've, for the last 10, maybe 15 years, maybe I would say even in my MSW program, which was 25 years ago, there were really important beginning efforts to say, we got to be more technologically proficient as social workers. But we tend to usually talk about it like that. We tend to say, we've got to get better at technology. The reason I want to dive into just one is to show you when we talk about technology and social work, it's at least just these things. There's more than this. This is just a beginning. There's smart cities. There's big data and analytics, social media, app development, artificial intelligence, data justice, citizen technologists, data privacy and security, sort of the surveillance state, virtual augmented reality, children's development in tech, health and mental health tech, that whole realm of personalized medicine, neurotechnologies, ed technologies, social change tech, access to tech as a human right, emerging human rights tech, what I went into in great detail last time, assistive technologies, tech across the lifespan, robotics, and the Internet of Things. Each one of these has a deep scientific bench. Each has a deep, increasingly deep, well, most of them have a commercial bench. So there's markets associated with these, and there are deep democratic sort of issues and human rights issues associated with these. When we say social work needs to get more deeply involved in technology, it means that we have to show up in all these spaces, that we need to invite each other to say, you know what, I'm a social worker who specializes in the ethics and safe utilization of neurotechnologies for human well-being. Or I'm a social worker who specializes in assistive technologies or tech across the lifespan. We have to invite ourselves to be part of these spaces in more in-depth ways. And I don't want to say there aren't social workers who aren't doing this, but this is not the dominant area of our practice. We have to go beyond saying, we should sure get better at tech. We've got to invite ourselves, encourage ourselves, incentivize ourselves to go to these spaces and use some of this information to make a difference maybe in some of these other areas that I already mentioned. So one way to organize the way we might think about this is to think about our spheres of influence: social work practice, social work in action, social work in education, the way we prepare, and social work research, the way we produce knowledge, social work knowledge production. And to think about, those issues across a chart here that sort of says, let's have social work practice, equity, tech, climate, economic disparities, health disparities, geopolitical issues, and the emergent. Let's just try to make sure that we plug in to each of these areas more in a more sophisticated way. That's one way to come at it, and that might be a way that would get us further than we are now. The challenge is that we have to think more exponentially. It's not just a matter of looking at one thing, it's also about the intersection. So down the left-hand side and across the top, I've got the same issues. It's not just about the future of tech, it's about the future of tech and its intersection with climate or economic disparities. It's not just the future of health disparities, but the way health disparities will intersect with tech and climate and geopolitical and other emergent issues. That's why signals practice, anticipating how these intersections will impact vulnerable people, and social work innovation space to partner to prevent and to intervene in these social problems. This is about, in other words, this is way too simplistic a way to think about what we're up against and the work we have to do. We have to think about how to track, engage, and influence the intersection of these issues in the future. I go to meetings and I see maps like this all the time. These are maps that tech futurists put about the future of humanity, of the future of the world. I showed this at the first webinar. My question to us as social workers: who will win? Powerful forces are putting maps like this out into the world. Who will win if these futures come to pass? Who will lose? Who decides? What emerges? Who is vulnerable? So thinking about things like connected healthcare, smart cities, the automation of everything, healthy life extension, for who? Money 2.0, for who? Human 2.0, for who? So in the Why Are There No Black People in the Jetsons, they say that even the robot had sort of a white affect, a white sounding voice, Western European sounding voice. And who wins, who loses, who decides, what emerges, who is vulnerable? We belong in these spaces to complicate, intensify, deepen, interrupt these conversations out of our ethics and our sense of possibility. So our national knowledge and action centers, this is just a few, but the ones that were top of mind for me, this building an agenda. In practice, we have NASW. In education, we have CSWE. That's National Association of Social Workers, Council on Social Work Education. Educational leadership is NAD, the National Association of Deans and Directors. Practice leadership, we're all together this morning with the National Network of Social Work Managers. Research, the Society for Social Work Research and Grand Challenges community, and community organizing in ACOSA. How might we create futures possibility spaces in all of these spaces in a different way and take it to that next level? I would suggest to you that in all of these spaces, there's been some dialogue about what is the future of our profession. It's as if nobody's talking about that. But are we organizing it in such a way that we are maximizing those conversations? And as important, are those conversations connected to each other? Because one thing is for sure, we all share one future of equity, one future of social work. These are all different spaces and knowledge and action centers, but we're all interconnected. So how do we take this futures idea and boost it from there? I'm going to share just practice, education, and research, some ideas that I think would be good starting points. I think we have to engage in new levels of truth and reconciliation with the history of our profession. And by that, I mean the social control roots, the white superiority, white savior roots of our profession. And it's not as if people haven't been working very hard on that, but I think using futures thinking to imagine what happens in 10 years if we haven't engaged in the level of work that is going to allow us to liberate our profession from these very harmful roots that still show up in the way that we practice and the bias that is ever present in the systems that we have built together. How do we acknowledge the ecosystem of professions that are getting and about to get much more complicated? We need to do anticipatory ethics work in our profession. I use the image of children in cages as an example, but there are many, that there were real tensions and battles within the social work profession about any social worker who participates in separating children from their families should not be allowed to be a social worker anymore if they do that. On the other side were people that said, if we abandon children in this moment to other forces, as this is happening, you should not be able to be a social worker. We had not done the sort of anticipatory ethics work to imagine that we might find ourselves in that situation. I would submit to you that no matter what happens next, there will be many more places where we're going to wade into ethics conundrums for our profession that we can scarcely imagine. And we have to do more of that anticipatory ethics work in our profession writ large. We have to prepare for social workers to navigate these curves of change that I talked about last time that are upon us in the modern era. Something is always winding down. What parts of social work are winding down? What new things are emerging? Perhaps we're over-investing in the old things and we're under-investing in the emergent. That is a larger conversation for social work to be having. We need to validate and encourage futures thinking as an essential aspect of ethical social work practice. And we have to share our futures tools and resources with our community leaders and partners. We have to deepen our resolve and resources to be engaged in more sophisticating and ongoing learning as professionals. And that connects back to that future of work. The future of work is learning as working, not learning prior to working or not learning to work, learning as working. We are learning as we are working. We are playing as we are working. That is an essential term. And preparing for deep transition of the structures. Our nonprofit ecosystem, which is something we do not talk enough about, is deeply fragile right now. The future of our structures, where so much social work is performed, is fragile. What may happen next? With our eyes open, we have to prepare to partner with artificial intelligence and co-create ethical tools to liberate workers from drudgery tasks e.g. paperwork, or the lower level things that so much social work time gets spent doing, and encourage and really invent that next level practice after we clarify what that is. But the future of professions is to use artificial intelligence, not run from it, to use it to advance our professional goals. But we can only do that if we're involved in co-creating those ethical tools and those frameworks. Right now, we tend to sit out from that. And without our knowledge, a lot of artificial intelligence, or consent, a lot of artificial intelligence is being used by places like corrections and child welfare, as we saw, mental health work, under the surface in ways that we're not driving. We are being driven by artificial intelligence, and we're at risk of continuing to be more so if we don't move into the driver's seat. Greater alliance with community leaders on all these fronts, greater activism to divest from or change increasingly neoliberal and neocolonial funding and regulatory sources, to value, create, and reinforce ethical, experimental, and improvisational practice spaces and learn from them, to value and encourage social work participation in increasingly non-traditional spaces like big tech or climate justice spaces, to influence licensing boards to become more engaged with futures issues and preparation, and influence our national governmental and membership organizations to be more engaged with futures preparation, provide more learning spaces like we're having these last three weeks. Deep breath. Then social work education. Engaging our accrediting body to consciously reinvent for a new age, maybe shorter degree programs, more accessible core degrees with an expanding menu of continuing learning and certification opportunities across virtually unlimited practice types, to recalibrate social work education to better fit the existing strained practice ecosystem on the one hand, and the lifelong learning imperative of the next generation of professionals, to incorporate many of the elements mentioned in the future practice ideas, to deepen across disciplinary problem solving and solution building approaches across that educational process, to balance evidence-based practice and practice-based evidence lenses with moral imagination, improvisational and community-led ethos and discovery. I think those are some of our most powerful futures tools. Beware of the educational industrial complex. I say this as someone coming out of a deanship. These are threats that increasingly pit schools against each other for a market share. We have to resist this more vocally. We have to have more future-ready faculty, and I have a whole blog post. I won't go into detail. It encompasses a lot of what I've said, but if you're interested, you can dig in deep. What does it mean to be a future-ready faculty member? And a number of schools I've worked with or shared ideas for how they might recruit such faculty and grow them. And then, frankly, go back to the thing I said before. Imagine that a social work student entering school right now as a BSW will easily be practicing in the year 2060. That's 2060. What will social work practice be like in 2060? Our only close imagination tool is to think exponentially about what we're experiencing right now. And then finally, social work research. How do we complicate how knowledge production occurs through the social work profession and acknowledge and challenge the increasingly industrial knowledge production apparatus that delivers most of our new knowledge to us? We need to innovate social work research to contribute from its unique perspective while participating and influencing in larger social science research ecosystems, influence the trajectory of change in our world through asking social work research questions that will not otherwise be asked. We should not be making ourselves look like other kinds of social science research. We ask questions no one else will ask, as well as expand the range of methodologies that challenge limited and positivist empirical ways of knowing. We need to welcome and embrace new methods, new partners, new ways of reporting, new ways of communicating, new kinds of research accountability. The questions are many. I have many questions as a futures travelers. I do not have all the answers because I think futures practice equals social work practice, but it's full still of questions. This is an emerging space, so the whole topic is full of that. Some of the questions I put together: how will we evolve to resist further devolution of encroachment and moral assault on our profession? And I think it's okay and really important to say there is pressure. Social work has been operating in a devolution. Our structures are devolving around us. There's been moral assault on our profession every day of the last years. How do we create and protect the spaces to create what we want to be as social workers, not just resist what we don't want to be? How will we clarify what we can do that artificial intelligence cannot? This is the number one work of the future question that all professions are grappling with. Lawyers, doctors, nurses, we are among those professions. How will we clarify what we can do that artificial intelligence cannot? How do we cultivate or renew and enliven our moral imaginations at this time? How do we best develop these anticipatory, intellectual, and ethical muscles? How are the things we most care about most likely to change? And who will win and lose because of this? How do we organize best our practice, our preparation, and our inquiry? And then these central questions of our time right now: how do we center the mutating, distributed, historical intensifying inequity, injustice, and health, in the economy and others across our many domains of practice? How we participate in global peacemaking and unity more explicitly as a profession? And how will we participate in climate change work and renewal? Well, we build on our strengths. We identify where we're stuck in our own wind tunnels and our echo chambers. We get clear on what we must resolve to move successfully into the future. We let go of some of our baggage by resolving it. We get beyond our limitations that we might put on ourselves as a profession. We get clear on what opportunities are most important to avail ourselves of, and find consensus on what's most important to protect about our profession. And as I said, we clarify what we do that artificial intelligence can't. I just want to throw this in because I have recently run across this DEPA IRE mapping our roles in a social change ecosystem. And I love it because what does it mean to be future ready for social work? Well, here's a map that is a creative, non-hierarchical, distributed power map of what it looks like when different kinds of roles of change makers work together towards a common goal. And I urge you, as you have the slides, you can look her up and see there's a whole kit, there's a whole program that goes along with this: guides, weavers, experimenters, frontline responders, visionaries, builders, caregivers, disruptors, healers, storytellers. What we see happening right now in the streets is comprised, interestingly, of all of these roles. And as you hear stories coming out of the resistance that we're watching on the news, and as we're participating in it, we're seeing and experiencing this in real time. So there are going to be new kinds of structures, new kinds of maps. I like this one because I think it exemplifies some of what I'm talking about. I just want to do a quick shout out to a sample of future-facing social workers. This is not complete. There are many others, but these are just people that I have, as I've been active in this space and trying to connect the dots and learn from social workers who have been experimenting with these ideas, if not leading directly in them, going where other social workers haven't gone in future-facing ways. These are some of the people. So when you get the slides, if you're on Twitter or look them up, they're all doing really interesting work in interesting ways. And I just want to thank them all for the courage and the innovativeness and the sheer badassery that they all deploy in their work to bravely go where other social workers have not, to quote Star Trek. Lastly, as I wrap up here, I want to just talk a few minutes about the Social Work Health Futures Lab. The last time you saw a logo of this kind, it said Social Work Education Health Futures Lab. My wonderful advisory board and I have decided to take education out and just call it the Social Work Health Futures Lab to more directly and explicitly invite the whole profession into the conversation and the work that we're going to do. This is my dream, I have to say. a few years ago when I first got into this most recent period to bring this kind of opportunity to the profession of social work. So we're funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. This is going to be at least a 2-year possibility space for social work futures thinking, exploration, and knowledge building. We will be putting out a call for engagement or nominations this summer. We will be selecting between 20 and 25 social work health futures fellows. We will be engaging with global futurists, but also be building our own vision. It is likely we'll do something like meet a couple of times a month. We will be igniting or intending to ignite a national or broader futures conversation to explore or develop our voice on these matters as social workers. Some have asked, why health? Well, health is a site that is the intersection of some of the most important social work focal areas. The social and political determinants of health incorporates virtually anything that social workers might do. So that is why health, and we're thinking of health in the broadest possible sense. We do have a website coming up very soon, and if you want to make sure that you get notified about the updates, please follow me on Twitter, and I will make sure that we will be launching the website via that. We will also be doing things over the next year, like doing some social work futures book and action groups. We'll be doing open webinars on futures topics like this one, but less from me and more from other smart people. We'll be doing journal and publication work, trying to really carve out a loosely unified but interconnected body of knowledge that is explicitly from social work. And we'll engage in and invite a lot of future of social work creative play, production, and creation. We'll also be trying to develop some coursework and curriculum guidelines, and then face the larger futures field and take up space to contribute what we believe is our unique opportunity to give back to the futures field. What would it look like for social work to be ready for the future in a new way? What would we be thinking? What would we be doing? What would we be learning? How might our profession look in 10 years if we started truly investing in these questions more? And what would it look like if we don't? I've tried to walk you through what I think some of these possibility spaces are, but at the end of the day, the future is so plural. So many futures are possible. It really is up to us, along with our community partners and allies, our fellow community members, and our leaders. It's up to all of us. Adrienne Marie Brown says, we're all learning what it means to be somebodies who shape the future, to operate at the scale of transformation. Things are possible right now that have never been possible before. How will we take advantage of that? And I want to close with Yatasha Womack's thoughts. She is an Afrofuturist, and according to her Twitter handle, she is a cheerleader for utopia. I will leave this respectfully with her Afrofuturism frame. She says, time is nonlinear. It can see in all directions. An action, word, thought, belief in the present can shape a past and shape a future. One can pull wisdom from the past and wisdom from the future. Are there insights from the future that can help you today? Imagine. What occurrences in the future would comfort you today? What future occurrences would give you a sense of resolve, a sense of peace? You don't have to share what they are, just think about them. Keep that vision in line with the ideals that value humanity. What moments in the past remind you of your resilience, your personal experiences, world experiences? What moments in history inspire you? What words of wisdom, practices from family or notables keep you encouraged? Keep them close. And now that you're informed on all sides of time, think about how you feel. Note the insights and think about how these new insights inform actions you can take or beliefs you can tweak in the present as you value humanity. As she says, and again, I offer with great respect to her and to the Afrofuturist tradition, stay lifted. I just want to thank you all so much for hanging in there with 3 webinars. I want to offer special thanks to NAD for giving me the opportunity to grow this work at its earliest stages, particularly Dean Gutham Menon for inviting me to develop a futures game for social work, and to Nancy Smith and Deans Nancy Smith and Eddie Uhara for being deeply encouraging. Thanks to Darla Coffey at CSWE for her incredible support. I want to thank the National Network for Social Work Management, Fordham, and Portland State for their support and sponsoring of this series, and to Dr. Lakea Cherry for her belief in this work, to Adalia Gaitan for her technical support and encouragement and help throughout these webinars, and most especially to my futures teachers, mentors, and encouragers. Thank you to all of you. Please join me in this futures work. We are much needed in these spaces. So with that, I'm just going to open it up. How are we doing on time? We've got about 25 minutes actually. So I'm just going to start in with some of the questions and we'll dialogue back and forth. So the first person says, I have trouble convincing my School of Social Work about the need to use social media. How can I begin leading them and encourage them to start considering and building expertise in the massive impacts of tech and social work? In the chat, there may be people in this webinar that have actually done that. So I would say in the chat, if people have done that and can offer assistance, my suggestion would be find schools of social work by just looking that are doing that well, and ask for their help in understanding their own transition journey of how they got good at it, because nobody started out good at it. Everybody was learning and everybody's kind of clunky at first. So I would look to other schools, and I have to say, schools of social work tend to be influenced by other schools of social work. So that's what I would say. I would also reach out to some of the people who are doing research in these spaces, look to some of their research and maybe intersect with them. There is actually I've seen some articles about how schools of social work have evolved on this. So I would look at some of that. That's question number 1. I am the director of continuing education. Where would I find social workers who are involved in the technology area to develop courses, workshops to teach social workers, helping to develop and honing their skills? Some of them are on that list I just put up there at the end, the shout out. And again, it depends on what part of technology you're talking about, because it's too big a term. So there are social workers working in social media. There are social workers working in data science and data analytics. There are social workers working in all kinds of things. So I would say clarify as much as you can a starting point. Is it social workers and artificial intelligence? If so, I would just Google that and you will find some things. On my website, I do have a pretty deep annotated bibliography that has most of the scholarship that I've been able to find from social work in it. It's growing and changing all the time, but I would maybe direct you to that too, to kind of scan and scope it out. Let's see. Hello, anonymous attendee. Do you have any advice about how we go about the process of creating space and pivoting with dealing from the everyday crises and tasks and short-term planning to really putting time and energy into futures planning in schools of social work? This will be seen as a major shift by long-term faculty, staff, and administration. Well, I don't have the perfect answer. I mean, I can say I have, I think this moment, most futurists are saying that the moment we're in right now, everybody's more open to futures thinking than maybe at any other time in modern history. I think everybody gets a sense that the way forward, yesterday's problems are probably not going to be solved by yesterday's solutions. So 2 things. First of all, when it comes to schools of social work are in a very, very pressed, fragile higher education ecosystem right now. The future of social work education is part of the future of higher education. And higher education is changing dramatically, and it's going to continue changing dramatically in the next couple of years. I have found it important to share that information with social work education leaders, and that tends to open up a little bit more dialogue we will probably not be able to continue doing everything we've always done the way we've done it and expect that we will be future ready. So, that's one thing. I also, several schools have brought me in, some of these other people that are on the list, just inviting guests in who can sort of poke little holes in the idea that what we're doing makes us automatically future ready. It can be interesting to say, hey, bring in somebody who's an expert on artificial intelligence and child welfare, or some other area, and really just Googling the future of this issue, the future of addictions, the future of mental health, and trying to gradually organize around getting new ideas inserted through conversations. I think one thing that definitely doesn't work, and the futures community is pretty united about this, is the professional futures community. It doesn't work to just try to scare people or bully them into futures work. I guess I've had the most success by simply saying a lot of the things I've been saying in this series of webinars, which is that I am so excited and interested about this, and I'm also very worried about it. Who else is interested, excited, and worried about this? Let's talk, and let's build capacity through engaging the willing. And those that are interested in it, those that maybe want to keep their head in the sand about it, I don't know what to say. I think there are so many people who are interested in it. I would say build capacity and keep learning. Start a futures practice, whether anyone else is doing it or not. And I think that goes a long way, frankly. So how do we begin training our faculty staff about how to think in this way? It's a different kind of thinking that has been previously encouraged in my organization. Institute for the Future does have on Coursera a futures thinking course that is free. All of it's available for free. I think if you want the full certification, you have to pay, but if you are not, and so you might be interested in that, so you could pay for it. But if you don't want to pay for it, you could just have people take some of those courses, and they're designed to be fun and engaging. It is a different type of thinking, but the truth is, again, it's an alternative to magical thinking. It is magical thinking right now to think that what we've always done or what we're doing now is the way we're always going to do it. That is magical thinking. And I think under the surface, people get a sense that that's magical thinking. So much has changed just in the last month or 2 months in terms of how we practice and what we're doing. People understand things can change fast in lots of directions. So I think there's an openness to this. I think one of the things I'm hoping that will come out of the Social Work Health Futures Lab is an array of a community, a network of people who are available to speak to a whole variety of futures issues and be sort of a network that can fan out and help to build this capacity in any way that people might want, in a way that just isn't so hard to find. So that's what I'm hoping. What can we learn from other social work organizations worldwide as they attempt to tackle these challenges? I think that's such a good question, and I do think that I'm looking to. I haven't seen a lot turn up in international social work organizations around this. I do see a lot turning up at the UN and international human rights organizations using futures frameworks. So as I've mentioned before, that's a great place to look. But I do want to say my own limitations in my presentation is to be a white American living in the Pacific Northwest social work scholar and actor, and I am limited in terms of my lens in that way. I would welcome, and I hope that potentially at international social work gatherings, it would be a wonderful place to spark some interest and cross-fertilization and co-learning and co-creation about how to make global social work a site, a deep sense of possibility space around this thinking. And it's very possible that other countries maybe have advanced way further. I haven't seen that quite that way. I have seen, I should back up and say, I think I've seen some things out of Australia that have impressed me out of social work that have been as close to this as I've seen, but I'm learning more every day too. So let's see, going down the questions here. Thank you for sharing book and article titles during your presentations. Do you have a resource list compiled that we could access? Also, do you have recommendations about hashtags or people working in this area that we could follow on social media? I will be posting a book list, sort of I'm not quite done with it yet. I'm hoping to have it done in the next day or so, of sort of 10 10 titles that I think all social workers should read as sort of a foundation for this. And I will be posting that to Twitter, but I'll also give it to the national network so that they can post it along with the slides if they're up for willing to do that. Do I have recommendations for hashtags or people working in the area? Well, the launch pad I mentioned around Afrofuturism has all of that. The resource list is really in my blog. So what I do in the blog is just share what I'm finding that I think is cool and cool people that I think you should be looking at. So the blog is divided up in lots of areas. You can kind of just mosey around in there and see what you like. I do have a couple of annotated bibliographies on there. So that gets you more into the academic literature. I have Twitter searches that I've put together on different topics or just cool stuff that I find. Is there any way to get the first 2 parts of this webinar series? Yes, they will all be posted on the National Network for Social Work Management website. So they'll all be there. How would you broach these subjects? How would you broach these subjects of the need for change and evolution in your workplace with a program coordinator that has a really hard time with change? How do you validate the need and importance without backlash or hurt pride? I mean, you know, now we're getting into just basically, this is such a huge organizational challenge anyway. Leaders who are afraid right now, leaders who are feeling like they need to look like they know everything right now, leaders who are rigidly holding on to old or pre-existing worldviews or ways of operating. And I would say as many social workers that are on this call would have different ideas about how to navigate that. Some people would just say, you know what, you got to just do it and let the chips fall where they may. Other people might say, you got to bring leaders along, you got to manage up. You have to find ways for them to find themselves in this work and take pride and get credit for stepping out into the future in some important ways. But I have to say my experience about this myself, and I'm just one person, is that my own challenge of making this work accessible and really trying to find a way for futures thinking tools and resources to meet the challenges and fears that leaders are having is the best way, because that's really what they're there for. This isn't about just getting good at navel gazing and all of us just sitting around with a daisy in our mouth looking up at the sky thinking about how great it is to think about the future. This is about how to make the things we do now more relevant and ultimately more impactful. So how do we help? All leaders want to be impactful. They want to do a job. I think most in our profession want to do a good job, not all. And I'm not saying there aren't a lot of folks without flaws, and we do have some leadership crises in some sectors. But generally speaking, connecting futures, tools, and resources and thinking to the very real problems leaders are having, that's a challenge. And I would be happy to talk to you about that in some practical ways. So the pay of social workers is very low and the work is very difficult and grueling. How do you see this for the future? Thank you, Rebecca. I think that's sort of one of those transformational spaces that we need to create to basically say, again, the pay of social workers is bad. And this has been part of that devolution and that being gobbled up by a neoliberal infrastructure for the last 10 or 20 years. We need transformations in the way we think about and authorize care for each other and protection and restoration of our community. It's not just social workers, it's teachers, it's nurses, it's other kinds of care workers and caregivers and other kinds of civil or civic engagement leaders and folks. So I think it is going to require a revolution of the way we think about this kind of work, and ultimately kind of going back to the game of what would we do with $57 billion that we now invest in police? Well, what would it look like if we could invest that in communities in different ways and both pay the people who've been providing that work more, but then deepen and complexify in good ways the range and menu of types of opportunities that we have to build health and build well-being in our community. Hi Lori, what traditional social work skills do you think will be transferable to futures and cross-disciplinary work? I mean, skills is an interesting term. I think about mindset as much as anything. It's something I think we don't explicitly talk enough about, but it's this idea of moral imagination. This idea that I think we are, social work at its best can be sort of equity based, but imagination centered. We're trying to solve problems in agile and creative ways. And I think that that ability to be agile, to move around, but also I think social work naturally looks at ecosystems, and our ability to look at the interaction of ecosystems and think those things through is, and all the skills that go along with that are hugely important and actually very future-facing kinds of skills. So a social worker who might go into a future space would hear people describing lots of things that would make you think, dang, that's social work, y'all. But nobody's really talking about it that way. They're calling it other things. So we need to claim some of that. Would I please share the website again? I think you mean my website, which is socialworkfutures.com. And my Twitter handle is @LauraNissen. So socialworkfutures.com and @LauraNissen are places where you can continue to get updates on the Social Work Health Futures Lab. Lakay, is there any chance that you could provide a direct link to the website where everything would be provided, please? And then Elaine says, sorry if I missed this, are there any futures work futurist meetups open to those who are newer to this work and curious about the community? Such a good idea. I mean, yes. And I'm going to do a shout out to Twitter, only because I think if you are interested in this kind of work and thinking and you are not on Twitter, this is an awesome time to get going on Twitter, because futurists hang out on Twitter all over the world. There's so much interesting stuff going on. And right now, I mean, there are 4 or 5 meetups or free trainings or learning opportunities every single day somewhere in the world, at least, that are showing up on Twitter. So lots of opportunities. And I have a Twitter, there are lists that different futurists have online. I've accumulated a lot of stuff over the last couple of years. I have a Twitter list of women futurists that I follow all over the world. But I follow a lot of different folks. A lot of the big names in the classic leaders in futures work are alive and active and contributing and accessible. It's really fun. So in terms of meetups, I'm here in Portland, Oregon. There is a group called the Speculative Futures Association, I think. There are, in many major cities, there are futurist meetups on the monthly. And I'm actually trying to get a group started. There's not one here in Portland, Oregon. I'm trying to get one started here. But in bigger cities, if you just Google around, you can find those and different places. And then I would urge you to look into the Institute for the Future. They have been doing so many free webinars with just amazing thinkers and actors in the futures world. I was really thrilled and honored to do one of their webinars a couple weeks ago. So, okay, hello, Molly. I think the field experience is so crucial to get students to have experience outside of traditional social work areas. Do you have advice about how to make the case to those businesses for social workers to be placed there, since they don't generally work with schools of social work? Well, this is a really good question, or really important. I think this is probably part of our evolution, right, Molly, is to think about the why. Why would we want to have a social work field placement at Intel? Why would we want to do that? What would we get out of it? What would a student get out of it? What's going on there that might be sort of friendly to some of the issues I've talked about? Yes, it would be on the margins, but as it turns out, at Intel, they're developing an algorithm that's going to be used in healthcare that will screen people between this kind of service and that kind of service, and there are huge ethical and equity implications. That could be an amazing place for a social worker who is tech-minded to have a chance to really get in there, roll up their sleeves, and sit there with programmers and creators to hash through that. But it would also require a social work field supervisor who may not work there to be friendly and open to that. I mean, there's cultivation. So there's a lot of cultivation work to do, I think, with CSWE, with the Council on Accreditation, with the way that we think about what goes on in social work education, much of which I deeply, again, respect and value. But is it going to make us future ready in the ways that we need to be? So Molly, I think that's the work. There's development work that has to go on. I don't think there's just one thing. I do think we have to do a better job. So if I know this is going on, I'm trying to think through what I would do, putting on my good clothes, filling out my fancy briefcase, and walking myself right into Intel to talk to them about why they would truly benefit from having a social work student in their midst as they're working on this project. I think we've got to get good at making that kind of pitch because in many spaces and in increasing numbers of spaces, we do show up. Sometimes it starts with things rather than that direct kind of field. It might start with just going to hackathons or going to meetups where tech people are talking about different things. So just showing up and making, using those good old social work skills to just show up and make relationships in places where some of these things are happening, making connections, going to visit, and hanging out. I was at a futures meeting. I didn't get to follow up on it. I was at a futures meeting a couple of years ago, and I met a little gaggle of people who were all from Facebook. And the next time I came to Palo Alto, I was going to go visit them. And then all of this has happened, and I haven't had a chance to do that. But I want to do that. Why? Because I want to go in and I want to ask, hey, are there any social workers that work here? And if so, I want to meet them. And if not, how come? And here's kind of the things. I mean, you kind of just got to jump in and do it. And then we got to share and learn together about how that might work. So with that, we're just about at time. Again, I thank you all so much. It's been wonderful being on this Futures adventure with all of you. And I can't wait to continue learning and growing and expanding our capacity as a profession to be in the future. I end with my most passionate commitment to equity and social justice for the days ahead. Let's all get out in the street tonight and do some more work. Be well, everybody, and I'll see you all in the future. Thank you again, Lakea and Adalia. Bye-bye, everybody.